Good morning, everybody. I can see that people are still continuing to log in, but it is 11 o'clock. So want to get started. First of all, just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Mike Bernier. I'm a certified financial planner with Canter Wealth. And we've been doing several different webcasts this year, especially as we're in more of a virtual world, and really excited to have Dennis McRoberts joining us. Obviously, we get a lot of questions in the fact that, I mostly work with retirees or those nearing retirement on Social Security and the uncertain future of Social Security. So Dennis, had worked at Social Security, I think, for a little over 30 years. So he's an amazing resource, and we'll go through from just the basics of Social Security to, some strategies. And then, we've gotten some questions that were submitted through the registration. And then I'll also open it up for other questions at the end. But good morning, Dennis.
Good morning, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Maybe you could give just a quick background on yourself for everyone.
Thank you, and thank all of you for participating this morning. Social Security started August 14th of 1935, and it was started for people age 65 and over, and a term they used for the general welfare of the people. Many people, if they didn't have families back then, didn't have anywhere to live because they had no income and they were old. So this was started to try and help those folks have some money coming in. And then as the years rolled by, more things were added to the Social Security Act, such as disability, dependence benefits, survivor benefits, and things like that. So as those benefits were added on, more money, of course, had to be collected from the wage earners or self-employed folks. And so here we are
Absolutely.
now.
Yeah. Well, and I was just going to say, what year did you start working at Social Security?
1975.
Okay, and it was a little over 30 years, right?
Yeah. So I retired in 2008.
Okay, so I know one of the things that we'll get into is obviously some potential changes or people, changes that people are concerned about, that could be on the horizon, but probably even over the time that you had worked at Social Security, there were a number of changes, I would imagine, in terms of how it was structured or whether or not it was taxable. I don't know how actively involved you got in that, but there's been changes over the years, even historically, right?
Yes, there's some very big changes. They've had, for example, changes to spousal benefits. If, for example, if someone gets married and they're eligible for Social Security, there's a 1 year wait, and that in order to start collecting spousal benefits. And so that was a big change from the past. And it saved the trust fund, if you will, a fair amount of money by having this 1 year window.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Before, there was no waiting period prior to
There
that?
was, that is correct. There was no waiting period. So, for example, if someone was truly on their deathbed, they could get married, die 4 days later, and their spouse of 4 days could collect survivor benefits and for not only the spouse, depending on their age, but the spouse's children. And
Gotcha.
so it was obviously not a long-term relationship. And so that's one of the reasons why they changed it was obviously people were getting married to get the money.
Absolutely. So you just have to wait it out a year, huh?
Yes. If you're
One
planning.
year. There's a cost. Well, why don't we, like I had said, let's just start with some of the basics. I appreciate, some of the background on, just when Social Security was initially introduced, and we'll get into, some of those percentages, on the FICA taxes later on. But, I wanted to just start with, when people are eligible to take Social Security. So it is different for everyone. And I was going to pull up a slide here real quick. Bear with me for 1 second. So in terms of full retirement age or normal retirement age, it's not the same for everyone, right?
That is correct. As we can see from the screen here, we have a moving full retirement age. FRA is the term that Social Security uses, and so you can figure out when you can file for your full retirement. So if you wanted to wait for full retirement to get a higher benefit, then you can use this chart, and it tells you exactly when to file. You're also allowed to file 3 months in advance of whatever you would like to, which benefit you'd like to collect, full retirement age or early retirement, or waiting to age 70 in order to get what are called delayed retirement credits, an increase in your check.
So you had said you can, apply for that within 3 months. Is that what you would normally recommend? Just, to get it in advance to make sure that it gets processed at the right time?
Yes, I would do that, and it's potentially pretty easy. They set the computer, the Social Security website up so that you can file online. You do have to set up a My Social Security account, so you want to try and get that set up first, and then you can uh, sign up on your own. Or if you don't want to do that and you feel like you want to speak with someone, you can call Social Security at their 800 number, 1-800-772-1213. That number is good 7 in the morning, 7 in the evening, Monday through Friday. And you can ask to have an appointment set up. And right now, they would, of course, all be phone appointments. And then a Social Security representative would call you at a particular time. So in order for you to either be ready for the call from Social Security, or when you're getting ready to do it online, you can have a preview of the questions. And how you can get that is you would go to this, again, the Social Security website, www.ssa.gov, and you would scroll to the bottom of the homepage. At the bottom of the homepage, you will see a series of blue boxes with white lettering. And so and one of them says forms. So you would click on the forms box, and then you'll see on the next page a variety of forms that Social Security publishes. The one for retirement that you would be interested in is called SSA-1-B as in boy, K as in kitty. So you can see a paper version of the online. And that is very helpful because it's very important to have exact dates on many of the questions for the retirement. So it can help to preview these questions and jot down some notes for yourself, whether it's for, again, if you're doing it online or you're speaking with one of the workers.
Absolutely. And I think, where that really will come into play, and we'll get into in just a few minutes, is, if you were married for a certain period of time, how long were you married? And so there are going to be some key dates. But yeah, even just for yourself, I think that's a great idea is, pulling up that form so you know what questions will be asked. And sometimes you had said, and I've experienced this with clients, but trying to set up that what My Social Security, I think you said it was called, on the Social Security website. The good news is it does some identity verification, but if you don't answer some of those questions right, you do want to maybe do this as soon as possible, just because I've seen people run into problems, and I think you had said yesterday that you've run into that as well.
Yes, a number of people that are as savvy with computers occasionally have difficulty getting in. So as Michael says, it would be a good idea to do that, set that up sometime in advance. And there is some advantage to seeing that My Social Security account, because you can potentially see your work record to make sure all your wages are posted. Since we're talking about retirement, your Social Security retirement is based on your high 35 years of work. So if there was missing work, well, I know I worked in 1999, but there's nothing there. If you saved your W-2, you can turn that into Social Security, and they will plug that in for you.
Gotcha. Is that typically what you have to? Are there any? Maybe you might not know the answer, but are there any other ways? I'm just thinking. 33 years ago, I worked a job and I made a certain amount of money. I think people try to keep as good records as possible, but might not have their W-2. I guess that's probably the only way to get that updated.
That is, it's about the only way, and many people have been accidentally shortchanged because sometimes an employer, whether they're short of money or just unethical, will pretend they're paying in, and they haven't. I met people when I was working that came in to file for Social Security. They had no work, but
Gotcha.
they worked maybe actually 10 years at Joe's Body Shop, but there's no work, and she had tossed all of her W-2s, so there was no way to prove it.
Okay.
So it's very important to look at the work record and try and save some of these important papers.
Sure. No, without a doubt. So it's based on the last 35 years, but the minimum amount that I need to have worked and paid into Social Security to receive a benefit is 10 years or 40 quarters, right?
That is correct. Now, it's just to be a minor correction. It's not the last 35 years, it's any 35 years. So let's say someone earned a fair amount of money when they were 18 to 22, then they took a few years off to go to college or a trade school or something. Well, then if those were high earnings back when they were 18 to 22, those would be used.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that's really important.
Yes.
So like you had said here, while we're on this slide, full retirement age, it is different for not necessarily everyone, but, based on the year that you were born. And so what is the maximum benefit at full retirement age in 2020?
Right now, it's 38, in round numbers, $3,800 is the highest check for someone that paid the maximum for 35 years of work.
Okay. That's at age 70 though, right?
No, that's it. 1 second, let me check my chart here.
Yeah, because while you look that up, and we're looking at this chart here as well. So at age 62, regardless of your full retirement age, that is the earliest that you can take it. And one thing I'll point out right here is, if you take it early, then there is a reduction, and that is a permanent reduction. So just to use the highlighted row right here, if I was born between 1943 and 1954, my full retirement age is age 66. The earliest I can take it, just like everyone else, is age 62. But if I do that, then it's going to be a 25% reduction, or I'll receive 75% of my benefits. And then that is a permanent reduction for the rest of my life. If
that is
I was
correct. And
born
I
before
found
38, it would be 80%. Sorry?
I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes.
No, that's okay. Did you get that number? Was it age 70 or was it?
So you are correct. At age 70, the maximum for 2020 is $3,790. The maximum for full retirement age for 2020 at 66 is $3,011. And at age 62, taking it early is $2,265.
Okay.
And as Mike said earlier, that is a permanent reduction if you take it early.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, for some though, and we'll, I guess, maybe get into this right now. It's so hard because first of all, we don't know how long we're going to live. That's a wild card. So I think one thing that you want to factor in when you decide when you're taking Social Security is, family longevity. There's no guarantee, right? But at least that gives you some guide. But in terms of break evens, I know a lot of people will look and say, well, if I take it at 62 though, Dennis, even though it's a lower dollar amount, versus let's say age 70, that's an additional 8 years of receiving a benefit. How long does it take to break even by delaying it till either full retirement age or age 70?
That's a really good question. The way it works is that whether it's at 62 or age 66 and a few months, whatever it is, or age 70, all the numbers converge right around in the early 80s. So when you reach around 82, if you waited to age 70, you're going to be ahead. If you took it early, 62 to 66, you will quote unquote fall behind. But one also has to look at it is someone had use of that money from 62 to 66 or 66 to 70 and so on. So it's like everything else in life. It's a balancing act on what you think you might need in relation to your longevity.
Sure. And then what about, so I know I get it reduced, if I take it early, let's say at age 62, but also people need to be aware that if they take it early at 62, but then continue to work and earn income, there's an offset or there's a reduction in benefits, right?
That is correct. For example, if anyone takes their Social Security between age 62 and their full retirement age, they are subject to a earnings limit. And for 2020, that is $18,240. What this means is, let's say I take retirement at age 62 and I have an opportunity to work a part-time job. If I earn under 18,240, I keep my full retirement check and I keep my full Social Security. But for every $2 I earn over that 18,240, one of the Social Security check is held back. And so they typically withhold the money the following year, approximately, to get caught up. So just remember that. But also the good thing about working is that if you have 0 years out of the 35 years that are used for retirement or very low earnings, this 18,000 can potentially increase your check by dropping out a low year, and the Social Security computer automatically does a recomputation and increases your check. And this is outside of the COLA, cost of living adjustment.
Right. And now one thing I've heard before, but I think you had corrected me that it's not, that this doesn't happen. But if someone takes it at age 62 and then they get that reduced benefit because they're continuing to work, at full retirement age, it does or it does not recalculate to then pay some of that back to them?
It does recalculate. So let's say someone, again, in our example, at age 62 starts collecting, and then they have an opportunity to make some money. They can put their check into suspension, meaning you're not getting any money. You're technically eligible. You're just not getting any money because you're earning over the 18.2, and by not collecting, you're removing some of the reduction factor.
Gotcha.
So if you took it for 6 months and then had a great job opportunity, and then you restarted your checks after 66, well, you'd only have a 6-month reduction. So, but those things usually don't happen as a general rule, but you should keep that in mind if you have an opportunity to pick up some extra money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, so let's get into, you'd mentioned cost of living adjustment. So does Social Security get a cost of living adjustment every single year?
No, they don't. Sometimes it depends on the Department of Labor. Their labor statistics section does a cost of living, and then it is derived. The COLA cost of living adjustment for Social Security is derived from the Department of Labor information. And interestingly, they remove from that computation food and fuel, including gasoline, heating oil, and all that, because they can be so volatile. But unfortunately, as we know, they can be very expensive and go up and down willy-nilly practically. Sure. So anyway, this is what we have to live with, and that's how it's calculated. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what I think you were about to just go there, but what has it been? What was it this year? Or what are we looking at potentially for next year?
2020, the amount was,
and I don't know if you said it too while you glanced for that. I know it was low, but it's based on the consumer price index, right? I know you had said based on that statistic released by the Department of Labor, but it is based on the consumer price index.
Yes, and so it's about 1.6% for 2020, and the estimate right now will be about 1.1%. This amount is typically announced within the next month or so.
Gotcha. And yeah, I mean, I remember, from earlier on in my career that, there's been other years, it's been a while, right? But, where it's been more, maybe 4 or 5%, now it's been fairly low. I know there's been some years where it's 0, at least for me and, in my own planning with my clients, I tend to use a 2% cost of living adjustment or a 1 to 2%, depending on how conservative I want to be. Some years will be higher, some years will be 0, but, just making sure to factor some of that in. But I guess at the end, we'll talk about potential changes to Social Security. And I know this is just opinion at this point, but that could possibly be a change, right? Is doing away with cost of living adjustments, but I haven't seen anything on that recently. I guess anything could happen, but who knows, right?
One of the things they tossed around in the past was to do the cost of livings based on your original amount rather than the amount that as the years go by.
Because you're getting that compounding, right?
You're getting a compound, and there has been discussion of getting rid of the compound in order to preserve the money.
Yeah, I mean,
wasn't very popular, as you can imagine.
No, absolutely not, especially for so many that do just rely on Social Security for income. So we had talked, about full retirement age, right? For my own benefit, if I've worked long enough, I've paid into the program, I can either take mine at full retirement age, depending on the year I was born. The earliest I can take it regardless is at age 62, but it's going to be a permanent reduction. Latest I can take it, no matter what my full retirement age, is age 70. And the good news, between full retirement age and age 70, it grows at a fairly substantial amount, each year that you delay it. It's what, 8% per year?
Yes, it's 8%. And so you can get a really nice increase in your check. And as we said earlier, you can, let's see, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. You can take, it's age 70. When you take it at age 70, you want to make sure that you file for the benefit at age 70, because there's only 6 months of retroactivity allowed. So what this means is that, let's say, we'll use a couple of examples here. Someone's 68, and they were going to wait to age 70, but they decided they wanted to take it now. And if, let's say, they wanted a lump sum, they could get 6 months of retroactivity. So, but if you go to 70, you're not gaining anything. And in fact, I had a client in the last couple of years that did not file to age 75. And since you only have 6 months worth of retroactivity, the gentleman lost $100,000 of benefits. So
Wow.
make sure you file at age 70. Otherwise, you're truly tossing money away.
So it's interesting. And I mean, I see it puts the responsibility on us, but so even at age 70, the latest you can take it no matter what, it just doesn't automatically happen. You still need to make sure to file for that.
Yes, you need to make sure you contact Social Security. You can contact Social Security, of course, by phone or in writing, or when the offices open up again, by stopping by the office. Then they give you a couple of months to file for benefits. So it can all work out, especially if you're very, very busy, but you don't want to not get money you are legally and rightfully due.
No, I would absolutely say that it's not a good thing to miss out on $100,000 no matter what.
No.
So, that was all about, our own retirement benefit. But then, there's also spousal benefits and survivor benefits. So maybe we get into that. And I've got, this one chart that I can pull up here. But, as we were discussing, and then I'll turn it over to you, Dennis, but the worker benefit, or what I was just referring to as my own benefit, you can see this is based on, full retirement age at age 66. But if I take it early, let me get my pointer here. If I take it early, then it's that reduction, 75% of my benefit every year I wait goes up. At my full retirement age, it's going to be what's considered my full retirement benefit. And then after that, it continues to grow by that 8% per year. And one thing that we won't get too far into, on the short time that we have together today, but an 8%, growth is pretty good guaranteed rate, from the government. Who knows where that'll go in the future, but, that's why for a lot of people, I know we got, several questions on this is, at what point does it make sense to maybe live off of my other assets to allow Social Security to grow? And I think for a lot of people, it's very difficult to guarantee an 8% return. And so there's so many other factors that go into this, and you don't want to just look at this in a silo. But, for a lot of my clients, for example, I've recommended push out Social Security, especially if you have longevity and you're going to live past that early 80s date that you threw out earlier. Live off of your liquid investment portfolio where you can't necessarily guarantee an 8% return. Allow Social Security to continue to grow. And then when you flip over to start taking Social Security, then it's a lower withdrawal rate on your investment portfolio. But again, a lot goes into that. But that's the worker benefit. But then there's also spousal benefits. Maybe you can touch on those.
Yes. So if a couple is married and living together, the spouse, whether they worked or not, depending on how much they worked, in our example here, let's use a spouse that did not work outside the home. They can, as you can see, they can take at age 62, just like the wage earner can, but you have this permanent reduction. And so again, we're back to, you decide when do I take it in relation to how badly do I need the money, tax situation, and other things that are personal. And so the same happens with dependents, not only with a spouse, but let's say the the couple has a child under age 18. Well, that child is allowed to collect a dependent's benefit as well. The spouse's benefit is considered a dependent benefit, and so it can help out the family quite a bit, by whether the wage earner's dead or alive. And in fact, the benefit increases when the wage earner passes away. So, for example, the wage earner passes away, depending on the wife's or whoever the survivor is, they can get as much as 100% of what the deceased spouse was getting. And the child that was receiving money can get 75% of that amount. So it can be extremely helpful when you have a family issue like death come along. Now, there is a concept called the family maximum. And what that means is that, let's say you have 3 children and a spouse, and the worker dies, then the family maximum usually is around 150 to 180% of what the wage earner was getting. So what that means is, let's say somebody's getting $2,000 a month, they pass away, there's potentially $3,000 a month for the rest of the family.
Okay.
So if you've got a bunch of dependents, it's got to be crunched into the 3,000, whereas typically most people don't butt up against the family maximum.
Okay.
Another important thing is a divorced spouse does not reduce the prior wage earner's check.
So just to clarify real quick, so if I'm married and you had said, for now what, and maybe I'm wrong, but for survivor benefits and spousal benefits, you have to satisfy that 1 year?
Oh, you mean the 1 year comes in where, if let's say someone gets married and they're already receiving Social Security and the spouse can be potentially eligible, there is a 1 year waiting period before the new spouse can collect spousal benefits. And the reason for this is, many years ago, some ladies figured out there's a lot of dying old men at the VA. And so they were marrying these guys right and left, and they would die within a week. And then what would happen is the quote unquote spouse would get survivor widow's benefits. And if she had had children, the children would get money. So it was obvious they were getting married for the money. And so that's why they have this wait. Now, there are exceptions to the wait, such as someone gets married and 5 months later they get hit by a car. And so as long as the spouse isn't involved with the car accident, you can get the money then.
Long as he or she didn't run that person over. That seems like
Exactly.
a good criteria. So, yeah, because you had said in previous talk that we had that, yeah, as long as if there's a pre-existing condition, or like your example of someone, being in those last days of their life. But if if someone was healthy and then for whatever reason it hadn't been detected, but 6 months later they had a heart attack, right? I mean, you had used an extreme example of getting hit by a car, but even in a case like that would, as long as there's no pre-existing condition, that's the main thing.
That is correct. And you have to, as you can probably imagine, Social Security won't take your word for it. They would want to see medical report, autopsy, and things of that nature.
Okay. So while I'm married, let's just assume I'm satisfying that 1 year. While I'm married, I'm entitled either to, whether it's a husband or a wife, right? I'm always entitled to either 100% of my own or 50% of my spouse's, whichever's higher.
Correct.
Now, if so my wife, as an example, she had worked for years, but now she stays at home with the kids. So let's just assume that she didn't work at all. Well, once I start taking mine, because sometimes I clarify this with people that I meet with, is that if I start taking my full retirement age benefit, I'm receiving 100% of my own, and then she's receiving 50% of that benefit on top. Her benefit's based on 50% of mine.
Yes.
But then if I die, then she will no longer get the spousal benefit, but she'll then switch over to get the survivor benefit, which would be 100% of the benefit that I was receiving.
As long as she's at full retirement age.
Correct.
Or if she has a child in care. So if you had an untimely passing, she would get the money as well.
And no, that's a good clarification, because what we had looked at, and maybe I can just share this again real quick. The one of the takeaways from this chart here, let me, is that, if then the spouse was to take their benefit, or the spousal benefit early, there's also an additional reduction. So let's use an example where we needed the money, and this was something you alluded to earlier, and I do agree. I mean, I painted a scenario where I have other assets to live off of, allow Social Security to continue to grow, but what is really important is when you need the money. I think that's going to drive a lot of decisions on Social Security. But let's say, for example, I took my benefit at age 62. I have my 25% reduction. And then if my wife was to take the spousal benefit early, there's an additional reduction on that as well.
That is correct.
So one thing, though, that you mentioned, so even if I'm divorced, then I can also receive a potential benefit based on my ex-spouse's record?
Yes, you have to be married for 10 years. And one of the good things about, as far as not many times, occasionally, a wage earner will not want to disclose that they were married, thinking that another time, thinking it's going to reduce their spousal benefits or their own benefit. And that's not the case. And the reason the law was set up that way is that 30 years ago, many women were completely impoverished. And so they wanted to make sure that women had some income, especially when they had stayed home and done all the work at home, raising the children and all that sort of thing. So they want to make sure those folks get some money as well.
Absolutely. And so this would go back to what you had said with regard to that one form, which was what the SSA 1-BK, looking at all those questions and knowing those dates, you're right, of exactly when you were married, especially if it's been a while. And so hypothetically, based on what you had just said, let's say I was married for 11 years, we got divorced, then I married someone else, for 11 years, we got divorced. It's not going to affect my benefit any, but there could be multiple people claiming this, what you might call like a divorcee, divorce benefit on my own record. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly right. But many times, as you pointed out, with the spouse will have worked outside the home, and it'll turn out that their own retirement is higher than a divorced spouse benefit would be, for example.
And so I know it's not the spouse, maybe it is the spousal benefit. So the 50% while everyone's alive, but then also, let's say my ex-wife, who I'm claiming a benefit based on her record, if she was to pass away, am I then also entitled to a higher death, like a widow's benefit based on my ex-spouse?
Yes, you're allowed to do that. So the dollar amounts hinge, again, where you are on the full retirement age chart. So if you're above it, you're going to get more money. If you're below full retirement age, you're going to get less. And one other thing I want to bring up, since we're speaking about widows, a widow can file for benefits at age 60, but they get a very large reduction. And one other benefit that people may not be aware of is you can get a disabled widow's benefit, and you can file for that and potentially collect at age 50. So as everyone can see, this gets real complicated real quick. So if you're ever in doubt, you should contact the office, and if you think you're getting wrong information, file an application anyway. The worst thing that can happen is they'll say, Dennis, you're not eligible for this reason or that reason.
Okay.
And so that way you'll know for sure if you've gotten the right information, and you'll be more satisfied that you've done everything you can to receive money, of course, if you need it and you deserve it. So.
And one note on if I was divorced, if I remarried, then I'm no longer eligible for any benefit on my ex-spouse's record. Is that right?
Let me see. Remarrying. There's a chart here that can get a little complicated.
Sure. In lots of ways, right?
Sorry?
I said that can get complicated in a lot of ways.
It sure can. If you get married or divorced and you're getting your own retirement benefits, your benefits continue. If you get married or divorced and you get spouse's benefits, your benefits will continue if you get divorced and you're age 62 or older, unless you were married less than 10 years.
Okay.
And then for Widows or widowers benefits, your benefits will continue. If you remarry when you're 60 or older, if you're age 50 to 59 and disabled, your benefits will continue. And if you get married and divorced and you get any other kind of benefit, generally, your benefits will stop when you get married. Your benefits may start again if the marriage ends. So this information for our audience is in a publication that Social Security has called What You Need to Know When You Get Retirement or Survivors. And this is on page 7 of that pamphlet if anybody wanted to review it.
And that's on the Social Security website. What did you say the name of that pamphlet was called?
It's called What You Need to Know When Getting Retirement or Survivors Benefits.
Okay. And what you were just referencing was on page 7. No, that's definitely helpful. And, as we're on this topic of spousal benefits, I know there's also, and just the way time flies by, maybe a few years ago, there was a pretty substantial change where there used to be a strategy, that I know I'd recommended, quite a bit for a lot of clients, where you could file and suspend, enable one spouse to start taking the spousal benefit while allowing his or hers to continue to grow. But they've done away with that, right? And I think you had mentioned it before last time we talked, but there was a date. If I was born before, I've got it here, January 1st of 1954? January 2nd?
And just for the folks at home, for the publications, this is out of the it's called Retirement, out of the publications of Social Security. And it's if you were born before January 2, 1954, or at least full retirement age, and qualify for your own retirement benefits and also spouses or divorced spouses benefits, you can choose to restrict your application, apply for one of the benefits, and delay applying for the other until a later date. And so what people were doing, what Michael was just describing, was they would collect a spousal benefit and let their own benefit increase to age 70. But that was changed. And so the other rule is if you were born on or after January 2nd, 54, and qualify for both retirement and spouses or divorced spouses benefits, you must apply for both benefits. This is called deemed filing. If you file for one benefit, you're deemed to file for the other, even if you don't become eligible for it until a later date.
Gotcha, yeah.
And so that's a huge change. And they made the original change in order for people to do that, to do what it was called file and suspend, in hopes that people would work longer.
Sure.
But the only people that was really able to help was the upper middle and the wealthier folks, because many of the lower income wage earners work manual labor kind of jobs, and you just can't lift boxes for 50 years if you're a UPS man or something of that nature. So it didn't work out for the people that they were targeting. And so that's one of the reasons, or the main reason they did away with it, because it was draining the fund, the opposite effect.
Well, and I think on that topic too, I mean, I think a lot of concern, in meeting with people that either are receiving Social Security, or probably get more of the concern from people that aren't receiving it yet, is the future of Social Security, and where it's going to go. Are there going to be benefits? One thing that I mentioned to clients is there probably, there has to be some sort of change. I don't have the most recent in front of me, but, my understanding is in 2030 something, Social Security is only going to be 75% funded, meaning there's not enough money going into the program for the amount of people that are receiving benefits. But, who knows what the solution is going to be, but I don't know if you had any opinion on, some of the solutions or potential options to help continue to fund Social Security, if you yourself, not for you personally, but, when you get a question like that about whether or not Social Security is going to be around, what's your opinion?
Well, as many of you know, there's an earnings maximum through wages and net earnings from self-employment of $137,000. So if I'm working and earning a paycheck or net earnings from self-employment exceeding $137,000, then I do not pay any more Social Security tax, but I continue to pay the 1.45% Medicare tax. That's unlimited. I think to help the fund would be to increase that 137, that 137,000 on up. And so the average check for a person is only about $1,500. And so you take 25% off of that, the nation has a giant problem with the old people or disabled people. So I think it wouldn't hurt to raise the amount to probably unlimited, or they might try to figure out another way to get more money in. Let's say like by taxing a little bit of some sort of earnings. But the other thing as well, though, is if people can earn the money, I think they feel better about themselves, and I think it's just overall better for society if people can earn the money than having to go on to welfare. And we're going to be paying one way or the other, and so people being able to work and earn the money is really, really important.
Yeah, no, and that's been, my opinion too. And, whether or not it's a popular opinion amongst those that make more than $137,000 a year, the big issue is funding, right? I mean, especially as our, population continues to age. We've got the baby boomers, that are continuing to collect Social Security. I think back when Social Security was initially introduced, it was something like 42 workers, paying into the program for every one person taking it. And now we're at like 3 or 4 to 1. So it's an issue of how much is going into it. So that's always, and again, with a lot of my clients being either near in retirement, that's what I always tend to mention. And again, this is just our opinions, right? Who knows exactly what'll happen, and anything could happen. But at the same time, I see, them raising that cap, at least to some degree, to help continue. And they've raised it over the years with inflation, but probably, it might be necessary to have some giant increase or removing the cap altogether, like you said, just like Medicare.
One other thing is that they could raise the retirement age again, but as you and I talked about the other day, Mike, the new problem becomes more people will become disabled. So you'd have to figure out a way to fund the disabled part of the Social Security fund, because again, you can't be a carpenter for 50 years. Most people, shoulders wear out, knees wear out, and many other jobs, you can only bounce on a bulldozer so long, and your insides really get messed up. So it's really a complicated problem, because you're going to increase the disability if you raise the retirement age. Not an easy answer, but these are things that need to be considered.
Yeah. And one last thing before, and we're not going to just wrap right up, but I know many people had submitted questions beforehand. I want to make sure to get to as many of those. Some of those we covered just through the natural course of what we were talking about, but also just to throw it out there before we get into one last topic, everyone should be able to see the chat button. So on the bottom of the screen, if there are any last minute questions or anything you want to, throw out there, we'll try to get to as many as we can. But if you click on the chat button, make sure it says, that you'll be posing the question to either all panelists, which is Dennis and myself, or, everyone, if you're fine with that, and we'll try to get to that. But we'll probably, have enough questions to go through. So feel free to click on that chat button if there are any questions. But one thing I wanted to touch on, it also ties into some of the questions that we had received. But for some people, we were just talking about how much income is subject to Social Security tax. There are certain jobs, though, that don't pay into Social Security, correct?
Yes. For example, in California, our state, you have various state government jobs that have their own pension, and they do not pay into Social Security. So what this can lead us into potentially for the wage earner is a concept called the Windfall elimination provision. The easiest way to explain that is to give an example. Let's say I'm a government worker, and I've worked for over 30 years, and I did not pay in to Social Security. But then I had a part-time job where I did, and I eventually made it to 10 years. So I have the minimum, as Michael pointed out in the beginning of our meeting, 10 years as the minimum to get a retirement check. And so, but the problem or the issue for people that were government workers is the Social Security check is reduced. And the reason it is reduced is because the way the benefits are computed, Social Security retirement, they're weighted to help the lower income and lower middle income wage earner. They get much more return for their money. And so here I am, a government worker. I have 10 years. I am not a poor person. And so they changed this probably 30, 35 years ago. So it's depending on how much I earned in Social Security in those 10 or 15 years, in relation to my 30 years of government work, my check can be reduced by as much as 2/3. So let's say my full Social Security retirement check while I'm a government worker would be 900. But since I'm a government worker and I only have the 10 years, it is cut by 2/3. So I would get $300, which is in fact more fair. I know a lot of people really choke on this provision,
Sure.
but it is in fact a fair thing. The
Okay.
other part of it is the government pension offset. And what that means, again, easier to explain with an example. Let's take myself. When I was working, I was under the civil service system of the federal government. That's long gone. But then when my spouse retires, I'm potentially eligible for spousal benefit just by being married. But what happens is they take my pension and as a subtract, let's say my pension's $3,000 a month. And then the rule is you take 2/3 of that, which is 2,000, and you subtract it from my spousal benefit. So let's say my spousal benefit would be 1,500. I subtract 2,000 from it, I get 0. So
Okay.
it can be a complete offset. And the reasoning is not unlike the reasoning for the windfall elimination, is that the spousal benefits, when they were dreamed up 60, 70 years ago, were figuring on a non-working spouse or a minimally working spouse. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the logic for that.
What about on survivor benefits? So with that same example, if the spouse with the pension had passed away and there was a survivor benefit on that and that went over, does that affect Social Security?
No, the windfall elimination provision WEP, or the GPO, the government pension offset, does not apply to survivor benefits. So it's a good thing that way.
Okay, okay. Well, good. Well, no, I mean, it's, it's just a lot of questions around Social Security. I know we really went into a lot of the basics. I do want to leave some time, for then some of the specific questions that came in, and I'll, kind of walk through that. And I know, it looks like a couple were sent to me, privately as well. So I'll make sure to get those. But one thing I wanted to mention, and as we've gone through this, there's a lot of different things to factor in, right? Taxes, we didn't really get too far into that, but Social Security, depending on your other income, can be taxable. And so sometimes the decision to take Social Security or not might have tax implications. You have to look at the other assets that you have. And so, anytime we've had any of these webcasts, we always offer a free financial checkup. And, I think it's really important not to ever, just even more broadly, just look at taxes or just look at investments. Because if I'm just looking at investments, how does that affect me tax-wise? Or, because we got several questions on, I'm this age, should I start taking Social Security now or should I wait until next year? There's so many, it would be impossible to answer that in a public setting. And so, if anyone, wants to take me up on our free financial checkup, happy to do that. We're a fee-only firm. We put in all of our contracts that we act as fiduciaries, and it's just to make sure to get as much information out there as possible, especially right now with everything going on and the volatility in the markets, just making sure your investments are set up appropriately, what tax planning makes sense. If you're not taking Social Security, when might be the ideal time to do that, just overall retirement income planning. So that's something that we offer for free. And so what I'm going to post in the chat box to everyone, and we'll also send a follow-up email after this, is our evaluation form. Whether you want to take me up on the free financial checkup or not, we want to try to continue to improve these. We've done, others on estate planning and Medicare. So if you have any feedback on what topics might be, appropriate or helpful in the future, and just, to give us some honest feedback on this particular webcast. I'm going to post that in the chat box right now, but it's just Canter Wealth, Canter Wealth.com/Bernier, which is my last name. So it's B as in boy, ERNIER. So I just posted that in there. If anyone wants to take care of that now as we go through questions, or like I said, we'll send a follow-up email as well. Yeah, so whether or not you want to participate or take me up on that free checkup, if we can get as much feedback as possible, that'd be really helpful on that evaluation form. And then if you do want to take us up on that, there's a box that says, yes, I'm interested in that complimentary checkup. And then we can follow up with you to get something scheduled. So wanted to get that out there. But Dennis, I know we had several questions, but I guess since we had just talked about the windfall elimination provision and the government offset, what about, like I had a client, that had worked and not paid into Social Security, and she was eligible to either receive a monthly income stream throughout retirement or a lump sum. She had taken that lump sum, so is not getting a monthly retirement benefit. But does that lump sum affect my Social Security and fall under those same rules?
Yes, it can. In fact, there's just like the monthly computation for the government pension offset and the windfall. There's if someone takes a lump sum, Social Security has a particular computation where it is projected out for a certain number of years, so it can be offset, whether it's a lump sum or a monthly benefit.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's one that I know I've run into before that prior to that I wasn't aware of. Thought maybe that snuck under the radar and didn't necessarily affect it, but that's one of the questions, right? And so I think, looking at that form and understanding what questions you're going to run into when you're applying definitely is beneficial. So that question was about, a FICA alternative plan. So that can have an effect on Social Security. Couple that I think we had already talked about, but if I collect Social Security and continue to work, is there a limit on how much I can earn? The answer was yes, but only if I take it early. So if I take Social Security before full retirement age, the earliest being age 62, if I continue to work, if I make more than $18,000, then there could be that offset where they take some of my Social Security benefit back. But if I'm after full retirement age and I start taking my Social Security benefit, I can earn as much as I want, and there's no offset there. One thing that just popped to mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dennis, but it's per spouse, right? So that earnings limit of $18,000, let's say I'm married and I'm taking my benefit, I'm not working at all, so I'm fine under that rule. If my wife is working and making whatever dollar amount, $50,000, does that affect my Social Security and that reduction in benefits?
It does not affect yours, but if she was going to collect as well, it would likely, because she'd be earning over that $18,000, it's likely her check would go into suspension, but yours doesn't have a negative effect as the main wage earner.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that, since I'm filing joint taxes, sometimes that comes up. And I'm going to read this question to you again. I know we were looking at it, and I forget exactly which direction we went, but the question was, I've worked for 32 years up to age 66. And then now I'm also working and I'm age 74 now. So I started collecting my Social Security at age 66. Let's assume that's full retirement age. So the question was, is if I'm working from age 66 to, in this case, 74, how much will my benefit increase? Or, I guess the question was, and now I remember what we talked about, if I'm continuing to pay in, at that point, am I going to get any further benefit from that additional tax?
Potentially, yes, you will get another benefit. As we stated a couple of times earlier, it's your retirement's based on your high 35 years of work. And so what the agency does is they convert, let's say, work from 1985 to $2020. So let's say the gentleman or lady that wrote this question is making $75,000 a year. Well, then the computer automatically looks to see if there's any dollar amounts below $75,000 in $2020. And if there are, the low year drops out, the $75,000 goes in, and the computer automatically does what Social Security calls a recomputation. So you would get a modest increase in your Social Security check. And this is outside of the cost of living adjustment, the COLA. So you could theoretically, depending on your past work history and what's going on now, you could get potentially two increases a year, one from your work and one from the COLA.
Okay. Now, I guess similar to that, but one question came in, and I might pose it a slightly different way, but it says, if I draw early, so let's say this person took it at 62, when they turn 66, can I request that they reevaluate my payment amount? Now, so that was the question. Now, earlier, what you had said is, of course, I think how it related to if I continue to work. Well, if I'm continuing to work, well, then I'm adding more into Social Security. So then my payment amount could go up if that's replacing, other years. But let's just keep it simple. Let's say I took it at age 62. There is no reevaluation of payments at full retirement age, correct?
That is correct. So once you take the age 62, you have the reduction for as long as you're alive. Now, there is one way, a very good way, if you have a change of circumstances to get out of this, if you will, and that would be to file a withdrawal. If you have 1 year in order to withdraw an application, and you're allowed one withdrawal in a lifetime. So let's say with age 62, 6 months in, the person's situation is, I shouldn't have done this. You file the withdrawal paper, and you have to refund all the money at the time of the withdrawal. Then it's like it never happened. But you only get one time to do that. In the past, what some people would do, they'd take it at 62. They'd find they're in good health at 66, withdraw the application, repay all of the benefits for the 4 years, and then start taking an unreduced benefit. Well, as you can see, this becomes an interest-free 4-year loan from Social Security. So that's one of the reasons why they made this change.
And that was, the way time flies by, that was somewhat recent, right? In the last 5 to 10 years, would you say?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I remember that was a pretty good deal to be able to pay that back. I can see some other questions, really come back to, when does it make sense? This one I'm reading here is, in what circumstances would it make sense to begin withdrawing from retirement savings before claiming Social Security in order to delay Social Security benefits until full retirement age or later? And I think we had touched on that one, but it really depends on, my opinion, and then if you want something to add, Dennis, but is, do I need the money? Right? If I have no other income, no other assets, and that's when you take Social Security, in my opinion. But if you do have other assets, like for my clients, I run some detailed cash flow projections, every year, projecting out into the future. And I always want to be as conservative as possible in those projections. So if I'm assuming a lower rate of return on the investment portfolio versus what Social Security continues to grow at, that 8% per year. If I live a long life, if I live past that date you had mentioned earlier, my early 80s, age 82, then, for the most part, it will make sense. There's definitely some exceptions to live off of more of my savings, allow Social Security to continue to grow. Especially let's say if I'm married, like in my case, where, if I could use an example where my wife hadn't worked at all, and, then I might want to delay till age 70 so that it maximizes our benefit. But also if I was to pass away, and at least statistically, men tend to pass away, earlier. And so then that's going to, have her survivor benefit be larger. So it depends on your assets. Also, taxes. So, we're not really getting into this today, but I'm a huge proponent of Roth conversions if it makes sense for people trying to shift money into a tax-free environment. And so in certain years, taxes need to come into play as well as, maybe in those first few years of retirement, even if I don't plan on taking it, or if I plan on taking Social Security right after I retire, maybe I do push it out a couple of years or a few years, live off of more of my savings. Maybe that enables me to be in a lower tax bracket to then do some other tax planning, I guess, to put it that way. So really does depend, but I think the major factor is if you have other assets and if you have longevity, and bottom line is it's still a bet. But that's why, again, with, a lot of this information, and one thing, I forget if I threw it out at the beginning, but we are continuing to do webcasts. We also have, archives of our prior webcasts from earlier this year, which is canterwealth.com/webcasts. people can go in, log in, and be able to pull up any of these prior ones that we've done. We'll also have the Social Security webcast up there as well. So I know we had other questions, and so for some of the ones that were more specific, we're happy to follow up and give you answers to those questions. And I know we're right at that hour mark. Dennis, anything else that you want to leave people with, or any other words of wisdom when it comes to Social Security?
Yes, make sure that you look into whether or not you need to file for Medicare at age 65. That can be confusing when you're throwing in the full retirement age. They're obviously two different things, but people, when they're not familiar with this, tend to blend them together. Sometimes people can delay the age 65 Medicare. And if you're in doubt, file an application. Please do that. The worst thing they can do is say you're not eligible. And
Yeah.
that's not a bad thing. You'll know what's going on.
Correct. Yeah. At least you know. But no, hey, I definitely appreciate it, and having you join us, especially with your experience with Social Security, that's really helpful. I know we didn't have time to get into things like well, we touched on it, but disability benefits, which is something I know you help a lot of folks with. But yeah, Dennis, appreciate you being here. And then, to everyone, that attended, again, if you want to participate in that free financial checkup, just let us know on that evaluation form. But either way, whether it's through the link I put in the chat box or in the email that we end up sending out, just let us know, if you like the webcast, if there was any feedback that you had, if you want to, take me up on that free financial checkup, great. But I know I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're at that hour mark. And so, Dennis, I really appreciate you joining me, and having this conversation. And I know you also, I guess one thing that you can leave everyone with, you do presentations, for a particular group from time to time throughout the year.
There's a nonprofit that helps disabled children and adults that are disabled. And it's called the Special Needs Trust Foundation of San Diego. And the Special Needs Trust Foundation puts on, in a normal time, 3 seminars a year. And the first 3-hour seminar is myself covering Social Security, mainly Social Security disability, and a welfare program called SSI, Supplemental Security Income. And then the same program in the afternoon has an estate planning lawyer that helps people with trust issues, especially with disabled children or disabled adults. So if you wanted to check when the next Special Needs Trust Foundation, go to their website, and if it's not on there, you can call and find out when the next seminar is. If I knew when it was, I would tell you, but it's up in the air right now.
Okay, but you're thinking sometime before the end of the year?
Yes, I think it's going to be probably in early November.
Okay, well,
I don't know exactly.
Well, since all the evaluations since all the evaluations will come back to us, feel free to, if you want me to connect you with Dennis directly, if you have any questions or if you need any of his help, I can definitely do that. But yeah, I hopefully got a lot of good information out of this. Dennis, appreciate you being here, and I hope everyone has a good rest of their day.